Well, let's just kind of start. So just tell us a little bit about kind of where your studio is, just to kind of situate us.
Yeah, so my studio is in kind of downtown Burbank, Glendale, Los Angeles County border. It like borders all three of these little areas. It's an industrial park, and the space is incredible. So basically, it's a warehouse that hosts music producers inside those little rooms. I think you can kind of see one of the doors off to the side.
Sure.
And basically, music producers are able to work in their singular rooms. They have everything that they need. And so the rest of the space ends up being my workshop. I have my own private area, but I kind of like to work inside my private area as well as the more communal space. And I've kind of just turned it into also kind of like a gallery for me to be able to test what work looks like on the walls, how people can interact with it.
Because people are coming into the space who aren't necessarily even there to see you, and they get to see your work that way too.
Yeah. It's a communal creative hub. The folks that put it together wanted to create something that gave them the same vibe of like creative spaces in Berlin where musicians and visual artists could all collaborate and just be around each other and inspire each other differently. And I think I'm really, really thankful to have the space because it's also
a
so
big
much
space.
Yeah, I think it's about 3,000 square feet.
Wow, that's great. And have you actually ended up in a situation where you could kind of work or collaborate with some of the other creatives in there?
Yeah, I honestly I like having conversations with some of the musicians that spend late nights there. Because
I'm sure you do.
Yeah, they'll be in their rooms for 10, 12 hours at a time, come out for bathroom breaks, and even they get to see a piece start from nothing and then turn into maybe an eventual end. And I just kind of like asking them what they see, what they feel, and playing off of what a completely unconnected person's viewpoints are to the work that I'm producing.
That's great. So that's, kind of like how they'd be like, you want to listen to this? It's got a little bit more mixing. You're like, okay, like this is your process. So, here we are in your kind of main space. You have these beautiful chandelier pieces that you've made as well. Like kind of what, do you want to talk to us a little bit about how those came into creation? They're very different from everything else in here.
So the chandelier flowers were just basically a way to warm up the space. It is an industrial warehouse that can get to be, 40 degrees at any given point, regardless of what the temperature is outside.
Right.
And so it was just a fun way for all of us to collaborate on something to make the space a little bit more warm, a little bit more friendly when you walk in. It also cuts the edge that I think sometimes studio visits can have.
Right.
Because if you want to dive right into the work, it gives like a good segue into like building a relationship with someone coming to visit for the first time too.
Right. It is a welcoming vibe, I must say. Like when I got there, I was like, hey, this makes me feel like, really light, positive things are happening, and then we can kind of get into some more of the work. Now, here we are, like I said, in the main gallery. You have a bunch of kind of completed work, some are in progress. Is there any one that you might want to kind of walk us through you think is pretty exemplary of your process or kind of where your head's at right now?
Yeah, actually, I think you just naturally went
Hey.
to it. Yeah, so this piece right here is called January 6th, 2021.
Nothing happened that day.
Not much. Nothing big happened on that day. Just an insurrection and watching our democracy almost fail.
Right.
And this piece kind of speaks to what the vision I have, at least for the future and the creative space that I've been in, which is how do I create a symbol/visual language that speaks to what's happening emotionally for me, but also can have the potential to speak to the world and the environment around me. And basically the background story for this piece is it started in parts as I was watching the actual insurrection on the projector screen, like slowly unfolding.
You're watching big life-size insurrection? Great.
life-size projection. I think you'll if you pan over to the main area of the space,
Oh yeah.
like imagine where the boat is now, CNN just streaming what was happening on live on television. And as I was making the work, it wasn't I wasn't I didn't sit there and go, I'm going to paint January 6th and how I feel it. It just gradually kept coming together, because that day was such a weird and emotional day, especially just, as us being Black folks in America, watching how the, George Floyd protests were treated, and then being able to watch these people legitimately endanger lives, murdered a few people.
Actually,
Um, and like it was nothing like it was the craziest thing to witness. And so this was my attempt as trying to make some semblance over time. And now looking at it, it's like, yeah, it's like we're joyfully watching people jump to destroy democracy. We're watching democracy potentially fail, some people clinging on for dear life,
right.
not knowing what the hell is
Throughout
going
this
on.
chaos, and actually, and we've talked about this before, kind of the type of work that we, Black artists are expected to make, and there's this push and pull between abstract and kind of painting very kind of vivid and figurative depictions of our pain and our struggle. But I think when I look at this, like the emotions that you feel internally, like watching a police officer daintily help a lady down the stairs who was just trying to destroy our democracy. That's, if you could have looked inside of Tré Borden's chest, like there was a lot of that going on for sure. And I think that that's
Oh,
really
for sure. And it's also like the juxtaposition of how the commentary of it was too. It was almost like a joyful moment for some people,
Please.
And
It was the best day ever. It was better than Six Flags.
it was, yeah. So, I think some of the colors kind of speak to that too. And there are a lot of the colors that I'm playing with nowadays is like how to use primary colors as a way to speak to the everyday and potentially like contrast it for myself, because my everyday is not like most Americans. I'm sure your everyday is not like most Americans. We all see each
Thankfully.
other and interact with each other in the same way that we interact with a lot of these colors, but we don't really pay attention oftentimes. And that's where I think that's where we miss quite a lot of detail and context and just life.
That's great. I mean, I think that it's nice to talk to an artist in their space about their process, because most of the time we interact with these pieces, they're in a place to be sold or displayed, and we're not in the place that they're made. And I think that this gives it kind of even a deeper context. Like, what has it been like for you? Obviously, you've been in this space for a couple of years.
Yeah, about 2 years now.
Okay, so obviously the first year of being in your space versus this last year has been quite different. How has this been kind of a sanctuary for you, or kind of a place for you to grapple with all of this really, unprecedented maybe feelings and just realities?
I mean, it's been a mix. If I have to be honest, as COVID initially hit, the studio was the last place I felt comfortable and like could be productive in. I would come and I'd get nothing done because it felt like, you know, I felt like, what was the point? What's the point? Because I don't even know if I'm going to be here next week. Like this fear of this looming thing. And the best thing I did was taking advice from a few mentors that we all kind of made a pact where we would spend a minimum of 4 hours a day at the studio every day.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't have to produce anything technically, but being in this space often pushed some level of production. And it was also kind of a solitude because none of the musicians were there, none of the producers were there. So it would just be me. I mean, me for almost a year, just by myself in a space. The actual first 4 or 5 months of COVID, even the industrial companies around me weren't coming to work. So it was one of those things where I was like literally in a ghost town trying to produce work that for me often comes from a place of joy and a place of love was just impossible.
Yeah.
And that's where some of the flag or darker pieces came from, because I was just like trying to find a way to understand or cope with the world that we're living in now. I'm very thankful that I was able to build the boat during COVID, because without
Oh
that
yeah.
um,
We've
and
come
work
to
on
the
that
boat.
project, yeah, without that I wouldn't have made it, because that gave me a goal to focus my attention on. um, it forced me to interact with folks that were in New York, and like, work with my team in a really like thoughtful way, that it helped get through those first 6 months of COVID that felt like the end of the world in a weird way.
Yeah, it's like we all needed a boat, damn near. Get away from
Oh
here.
my God. Yeah.
Talk about this moment, what we're seeing here.
Yeah. So the two things that we're looking at on the billboard is a photograph of my Blessing of the Boats river to river installation. And so basically I work with an amazing team at the Lower Manhattan Culture Council, Battery Park City Authority, my project manager Kepi, to build this boat. And basically it was a way to get New Yorkers during the little lull of COVID in 2020 to come out and leave messages about how they would want to build a better community and society moving forward. The sculpture itself just served as a vessel for holding people's hopes and dreams, especially in such a dark time. It's made out of plexi and like stainless steel. And it basically reflects you, your environment around you, and asks you a really simple question of how do you, as one person, commit to making an action that helps create a more like equitable and better future. And it kind of holds all those messages as not just a time capsule for this weird time that we're living in, but also as a way to like hold people accountable.
Hmm. Is there anything that you would ever do with the messages in terms of like, are they deposited somewhere that like, if I wanted to go, having never been, I could see what were the wishes?
Yeah, so I'm actually going back and forth between that. So I'm building this archive, photographing all of the boats that end up inside, maybe building a website so that people can read everyone else's commitments. But
Hmm.
some of them are so personal as well that I wonder if it's kind of best for them to be private as well, and like kind of really live with the time capsule aspect of it. So I'm going back and forth, but the goal
Sure.
is any message put in the boat will live with the boat forever.
Okay.
So your message won't like disappear or anything like that. So it's between the archiving of history, or do you kind of let it live and see what happens?
And maybe your decision changes over time. Like maybe it's not been
Yeah.
enough time to even really release them. It's like maybe in 5 years, 10 years, 50 years, it'd be interesting to revisit. I mean, when I think I could barely think of a year from now. So thinking about 10 or 15 or 50 years from now is really overwhelming. But something to think about. I wanted to touch upon a little bit. Here's a piece. So when you and I met, we met at Neuhaus when I had literally just moved to Los Angeles. It's like right after midterms in 2018, and you were on a panel for Four Freedoms, kind of talking about your billboard project. And so when I initially met you, it was as a photographer. I didn't realize, I
Yeah.
didn't, I, at that point, I didn't know about all these other mediums that you would start to explore that you had already been exploring. Kind of talk about kind of what do these like. So in this frame here, we have a really important kind of public sculptural work. We have a work in progress painting on the ground, and then we have this kind of image which you took that was blown up into a billboard at some point. Kind of talk about kind of how these different mediums, I guess, what do you use each of them for? Kind of what are they different? What practices do they speak to?
Yeah, that's actually a really thoughtful question, and it's kind of crazy that they're all sitting here. I remember actually, you asked me a question during that panel, and it's stuck with me. Um, So I think the best way to describe my practice is I don't often focus on medium as much as I do message, and then from there find the medium that best suits the message that I'm trying to convey. Um, and what I've learned that photography thus far, or up until this point, has served as a way for me to comment on politics and um, societal contradictions, or maybe bridging gaps between understanding using photography. So it's like just I genuinely try and capture moments that speak to me for a very particular reason, and then come back to them when I find that they are useful to convey a message that I'm trying to convey.
Kind
And
of like an
then in this,
explicit message.
yeah,
Okay.
and in this particular project, it was how do I tackle xenophobia in the U.S., specifically addressing xenophobia in the Bible Belt in North Carolina, where it doesn't make any sense to me. Like if you are a practicing Christian, like you fundamentally should be supportive of refugees and immigrants, given that Jesus Christ was one, you know? And then speaking to the kind of the conceptual painting works, it's utilizing, whether it's just like fundamental paintings as the ones that we were looking at earlier, or
Mm-hmm.
even more of this conceptual work which uses acrylics and medical masks. It's how do I find a way to, again, like crystallize or solidify this moment and what this moment felt like for me, which is like obviously with COVID, it felt like this beast that was all around us that none of us could really get a real hold of. And then particular to the mask, it was one of these things where you need it for everything,
So
but it's
there's
also like,
masks, just to be clear for people, it's masks embedded in this.
yes, there are
Okay,
masks embedded
yes.
in it. It might be a little bit hard to see, but
No,
it's
no,
acrylics and
yeah, it looks great. Ugh.
um
The mask
on a
that will like
can.
never leave, honestly, in some
Exactly.
way.
And we're surrounded by them. They're and we will forever be surrounded by them. I can't imagine in 2 years from now that we're all going to feel comfortable not
You'll
having at
never see
least
me at
some.
LAX barefaced for the rest of my life. Straight up.
It's a monster. It's also a security blanket. It hurts, but it's also super helpful and like is a part of our daily lives. And the piece that I'm working on here is essentially going to be my version of a commentary, much like Jasper Johns was making in the 1950s and 60s. It's going to be my white flag that crystallizes this moment. And the sculptures, at least the public ones, are always going to serve as a way for me to connect communities in a way that fights stereotypes and creates connection, hopefully, because I
Right.
think that's the power of public art. Is we can all see the same thing and have our own individual experiences, but find a way to come together in that.
And despite all the insurrections and whatnot, it's like now more than ever, it's like, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on kind of like, you know, who you bring into your space and kind of how you connect on a personal level. But it's been hard these last couple of years to say that like I want everyone to just join hands. It's like I almost want to be like, if you don't get it, get the fuck out. And if you get it, then let me lift you up. And I think that only now, and I think that artists are in a very, kind of particular position to say we can actually use this to bring together. We can't tell you that, you're wrong, you're right or wrong, but like look at this. We're all human beings, and then that's at least a starting point for a conversation. Hopefully, that's more productive. Because I think that we're in desperate need of that.
I completely agree. I think specific to who you bring into your space, I think COVID was the best introduction into I get to curate the people coming into my home. Like this is as close to my heart as you're going to get outside of potentially being in a relationship. And
Mm-hmm.
it is very vulnerable in a way that when the work is shown in a show or in a gallery or in a museum, hopefully, isn't as personal and vulnerable. I had the most amazing studio visit a few days ago
All right.
where for the first time in quite a while, I had someone who's a complete stranger to me, um, who had seen my work through the Battery Park sculpture, was interested in sculptural work, but ended up coming to the studio space to see this work,
Wow.
not knowing what I produce for myself, because I feel like a lot of the paintings are for me. And the one that we're looking at now is a test that I'm playing with these like Afrofuturist
Mm.
cave paintings. But she spent
Great.
2 hours with me just having a really thoughtful personal connection as to why I'm doing this, like what therapy it provides me, what therapy a lot of the works in the space provide me. And it was reinvigorating to know that there truly are collectors out there that care about artists as people, the
Mm-hmm.
work that they're producing, but not in the way that it's an investment in the work, and the longevity of the work and the
It's not
value
just
that
a
it could have
commodity.
2 years from now. The whole flipping mentality and having someone just come and be like, look, I just want to support you. I love what you're producing. I want to know more about it. I want to build a friendship. This isn't about acquiring work. This is more about building a relationship and then seeing how I can support you. And I love the entire time I was sitting there being like, this can't be real,
You're like,
Because
what's the
I
hook?
honestly,
What's the hitch?
exactly, what's the hook? Because I haven't had that experience in some time. And she even spoke to it herself where she was like, we haven't collected much in the last 5 to 10 years just because the industry or the environment has changed where it's more about the business of fine art than it is about the artists and the relationships and the
Mm-hmm.
growth. And so she was just like, I just want to get to know artists in the same way that I got to know them in the 80s and like support their journeys. And like whatever way I can support you is important to me. And like it was so refreshing.
That is extremely refreshing, especially because, like, yeah, you are letting someone into your home, and so to have someone who doesn't care about you in it, like, I mean, I'm sure as kind of an artist who, especially a female artist, you have collectors who come in who probably, let's just say, don't have the same amount of tact and care, and how do you deal with that? Like, how do you deal with someone who's coming in and you're like, we're not on the same page, homie?
Oh my God. Yeah. I mean, because I'm talking to you, Trey, and I believe in the project that you're working on, I'm going to be super blunt. Like, I am incredibly hesitant on letting men into my space because I have, and I'm sure a lot of female artists or even male artists can speak to this. Like, there's this weird thing that happens when you meet someone and they kind of find out that you're an artist, whether it's through the art space at like a gallery or a show type of setting or not, where I'm sad to say this, but I'm always hesitant to know what the catch of someone being like, oh, I really love your work. I'd like to come see it. Like
Mm-hmm.
without ever really having anything to build from. Because I've had those moments where I've had male collectors that I thought were actually genuine.
Work or kind of leverage a relationship for some private issue. It's like that's the ideal relationship between a collector and an artist. It's more like I'm here along with your journey to give you the support you need. And then obviously there's also people who have their own agenda, and you were talking about kind of like what that's like to deal with.
Oh my God. Yeah. It's sad to say it, but I do have to be really mindful of who I invite into my space. Not everyone is wanting to do a studio visit because they care about your work. There are people that are interested in more like a personal type of thing.
Mhm.
And so I try and make it pretty clear from the beginning, like this is my job. Um, I'm treating this like as a professional encounter. Anything outside of that is not something I invite, nor do I think is okay. I know a lot of other female artists that deal with the same stuff when it comes to men, or even male artists that deal with the same thing when it comes to women, where it's like, please
Or
treat
men.
this as, yeah, yeah, exactly. Anybody, please treat this as a professional encounter because this is my job, and I don't be, my biggest goal as far as this career is never for there to be in between gray area, just because I think that has the potential to just go places that I don't want it to go. Um, and this is my home. I'm bringing you into my home. And if you're coming to my home under the pretenses of like work, then that's how I'm going to treat it.
Right. And it's like, and everyone knows like these slime balls who are just kind of like, oh yeah, let me come by. I mean, it must be really. I mean, but you get, I'm sure, more depth to kind of picking up on it. It's not, no one's 100% accurate, but yeah, I mean, especially and then that's on top of COVID. It's like you could have someone you really want to interact with. You're like, I've seen your Instagram, homie. Like, you be not masking. So I think that it's like there's just so many considerations now that go into kind of like how we invite people into this space. I mean, that's one of the, even the reasons we're doing this is like not a lot of people are going to have access to this even post-COVID. So it's a really great chance to get people to kind of experience this who may not. So I'm really grateful that you're bringing me and, bringing everyone else who might be watching this into your space. Well, this has been such a wonderful and like intimate and real interaction. Like coming into your space made me feel so at home and so good. And I'm so excited for, I feel part of your journey, and I'm really excited because it seems to be, out of what has been a very tumultuous and kind of uncertain phase, you've really found a way to thrive and stay true to yourself and like explore. And I think it's been extremely fruitful. Anything that you want, where do you want to be found? Whether it's on social media, or are there any things that are coming up that you want us to kind of pay special attention to?
Yeah, I mean, as far as social media is concerned, I'm doing a better job of posting on Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
So the name is basically my name, the Muna Malik. I think you'll probably link it or put it up
Yeah,
somewhere.
for sure.
And then like any new details is I'm going to be doing the Fountainhead Residency in Miami, Florida. I'm really excited to just
That's
be
gonna be so
outside of
good. It's gonna be so
the
great.
spaces that I know and producing somewhere completely new to me and meeting an entirely new and really thriving arts community down in Miami. Um, and then, yeah, I'm just going to be continuing to produce a lot of the work that speaks to me, and hopefully it speaks to others. And we'll see what happens. Two and a half years ago when we met, I was always kind of hesitant to be the person in the room being like, I'm an artist, because it comes with so many connotations and assumptions. Whereas now I'm like completely comfortable in that and love to take on any preconceived notions that people may or may not have, because
Sure.
fuck it, like this is my life. This is what I want to be doing. This is what drives me and pushes me, and is the reason that I'm still going. And so I'm going to continue to produce work that speaks to me and hopefully speaks to others.
Well, absolutely, and it does. And you are an artist, and I think that I think all of us who kind of like claim, we're doing what we are here to do, and it doesn't always fit neatly into someone else's idea. And I think as long as you claim it, like let them get there when they get there. So I think that you got to kind of lead by example, and you certainly are. Thank you so much, Muna, for doing this. You have a beautiful space. You have a very bright future. I can't wait to put one of those on my wall, so I'll be getting in touch with you about that. And everybody else, get them while they're hot because they're getting hotter. Thank you so much, sweetheart. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I'll talk to you soon.
For sure. Take care, Muna.
Bye.